Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I see that participants are rapidly joining, so welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Chris Burt. I am managing editor of Biometric Update, and with Biometric Update and ID R&D, we have joined together to present some research that ID R&D has undertaken. And joining me today is Alexey Khitrov, CEO of ID R&D. Thank you for joining me, Alexey.
Hello, Chris.
We are going to discuss this research, but ID R&D is a leading biometrics and liveness detection technology provider, and experimented on the performance of AI and humans when it comes to detecting biometric spoofs. Obviously, a major topic of interest within the industry. So I think maybe we'll leave just a few more seconds for people to join in. The numbers are still going up. There's been a lot of interest, of course, in this topic. So yeah, I think why don't we begin, Alexey, by you describing the types of biometric spoofs that this research looked at.
Absolutely. So let's kind of start with the high-level definition. What is it that we're looking at? What is it that we're measuring here? So what we did in this study is that we looked at the performance of the liveness function. So when we think at a very high level, when we think of any type of biometric authentication, a biometric system must answer two questions. One is this the right person? Is this Alexey? And the second one, is this a person, or is it some type of a representation of that person, right? So is that me, or is it somebody who is holding a mask of me? So, and there are a lot of technologies that are doing biometrics or matching. So answering the first question, is this the right person? But here we're looking specifically at the liveness. So is this a person? So is this a person or some type of a digital or non-digital representation or presentation attack? And we'll list specifically the type of the attacks that we identified and used in this study. But when you think about these type of attacks, they typically occur to spoof the biometric system, because if you think about it from security perspective, if I'm the bad guy and I'm trying to get into the I'm trying to take advantage of the facial recognition system, I'm not going to find somebody who looks like me, right? My non-existent identical twin. But I will I'll just go on a Facebook or LinkedIn and I'll print this picture. So, or I'll find a video and try to present it in instead of an actual person. So this is the technology that we put to test here, and this is the capability that we try to compare the performance of people and the performance of the latest generation of AI.
So really targeted to the security question that technology service providers need to answer in a practical sense. Right?
Exactly.
Now, before we get a little further into this experiment, I just want to take care of a couple of housekeeping items. Good afternoon to Oliver in London. Thank you for greeting us and prompting me with that notice in the chat. We have the chat enabled. We would like everyone to feel free to chat with each other. We're actually going to be conducting a bit of a poll a little bit later on, which we'll do through the chat. Now you can set that as an attendee to have everyone see your messages, or just those of us on the panel. That's fine. I'll be keeping an eye on that for the purposes of the poll. We would also like to invite you all to join us in conversation. Use the Q&A function, which is just found at the bottom of your Zoom screen there, and enter any questions you'd like to have answered. Some of them will probably be answered in the course of our discussion. Others I will be checking in with, and we'll take care of those live on air. Most of them probably towards the end. but we definitely want to invite participation and engagement and answer everyone's questions, right, Alexey?
Absolutely.
Great. So getting a little further into the experiment, you know, it's clear what you were trying to do, but why did you undertake this experiment? What were you trying to reveal?
So what we're seeing on the market is that we're seeing a great growth in the usage of facial recognition and facial liveness. Specifically on the liveness side, if you're looking at the results that are shared by some of the leaders in the space, we're seeing over 1 billion liveness checks that was conducted in 2021 globally, and that number is growing rapidly. So it's a really growing growing capability, growing technology. What we're also seeing is that some of the organizations, some of the enterprise customers are trying to see push from regulators, and there's some questions in the public. Should those results be checked by humans? Can we really trust this technology, or should we have somebody to actually oversee the results to make sure that the technology is performing well? So it got us thinking. So who is actually better in making that the determination whether it's a presentation attack or it's an actual person in front of the device? So who should be checking who? And we suspected that AI and the current generation of technology can do a better job, but we really didn't know. So in order to do that, we conducted the study.
Great. So what can you tell us about how the study was conducted and the details of the research?
Absolutely. So let's first talk about the methodology of the study. So to make sure that it's a kind of well that we do it at the right scale, we created a data set of roughly 175,000 randomly selected images. We identified five types of attacks, and we'll kind of go through that list shortly. And then we selected a number of bona fide images, which means that these are the images of the people in front of the devices. We also used a popular crowdsourcing platforms where we worked with over 8,000 participants, human participants, who took upon themselves to participate in a study and tried to make this determinations. Each of the people that participated in the study first went through training, and then we conducted a test to make sure that these people understand what they're doing and they can make these determinations. So it's important to know that the people who participated in the study, these are not professional analysts, they're not professionals, forensic examiners who are who are doing this for a living, but these are the people who have a certain level of training, and we're tested to make sure that they know what they're doing. So we also did what we also did is that when we looked at the results of the study, we measured a number of things. We measured performance and the error rates for individuals that participated in the study, and then we also measured kind of a collective ability of people to come to the right conclusion. So we put the same images in front of a number of people, and then we and kind of in a separate set of results, we collected we counted the results as those results were decided by the majority of the people who participated. So each image went in front of about 17 people. If you're doing a jury that decides whether you go to jail or not, that it's being decided by 12 people. we decided to go even further to make sure that we give the we give people a chance to get to the right answer. And then what we measured in the end of the study is that we looked at accuracy, which measured in two ways. So one is APCR, which basically shows the number of times the answer is incorrect in a way that the attack passes through. And then we measured the BPCR, which measures an error when a good person, an actual person is being incorrectly qualified as a presentation attack. And then we also looked in latency. So how long does it take a human? How long does it take a machine to make that decision? So so we tried to develop a methodology that can conduct the study at scale. So 175 images, more than 8,000 people, ability to measure it by the majority vote, and then we created a data set of a number of different types of attacks. So there are 5 different types of attacks that we use for the study. And they go like, and they really cover the entire spectrum. So from the simplest of presentation attacks, when you just print the photo, that's a printed photo, then or display attack, when you're displaying a picture or an image on the screen of your smartphone or your computer, and then you take a picture of that picture. Took a little bit more sophisticated stuff like printed cutouts, when people just cut out the contour of the person, or the 2D mask or 3D mask. You know, these are the silicone masks that cost hundreds and in some cases thousands of dollars. So we wanted to see, you know, what is the difference in performance, not just in general, but also on a specific pair attack basis. And then we also selected some kind of clean, correct images of actual people in front of the devices. So at this point, what we wanted to do is to have a little bit of fun in this webinar and to ask the participants to see, to put you guys in the shoes of those examiners in the study. So we collected a few samples of images for different types of attacks. And what we want to ask you to do is, if you guys can go into the chat and you can send this this information to everybody. You can send it to participants, and I will ask Chris to keep an eye on the results that we're getting, and see if you guys can identify attacks here, right? So for each set of the images, we would ask you to identify one or a few images that has the presentation attacks. And the first set of images, among these 4 pictures, there's one or few pictures with a 3D mask. So let's see if you guys can identify it. Chris, are we seeing any responses from the audience?
Seeing a lot of responses. Thank you to everyone who is chiming in. There's a lot of people see number 2 as a spoof. So that's great. A lot of consistency on that one. And then we're definitely seeing a bit of a variety beyond that. I see a few guesses on number 1, and and they've all got, each of them have got at least 1 vote. So
all right.
Yeah, so there's some interesting results there, but number 2 is definitely the consensus. And I just want to mention too, we will talk a little bit more about demographics. I noticed those questions there. Those are good questions. We're going to get to that soon. But yeah, Alexey, it's mostly number 2.
And that is correct. So of these 4 images that you see in front of you, 3 of these images are the images of the actual people, of the actual selfies. And 1 image, number 2, that is the image of the 3D mask. And what's interesting is that for the human eye, it's pretty obvious, right? So we can see that this figure is sitting on the table, and there's some silicone right below the neck. But for the biometric systems, that's actually a very difficult situation, because there's a lot of depth in this picture. There's, there's some facial hair, there's some glasses. So if your system just trying to study whether there's any depth into the picture, that would be a pretty easy spoof that way. So, and this is the most expensive way to spoof the system with the with the presentation text. So this masks go for hundreds of dollars, and we're actually seeing a lot of them on the ground. There are a lot of people who are using these type of masks to open an account, to create fake identities. So again, we clearly see that for human eye, that's an attack that we can identify. Here's another type of attack. So this is called a print cutout attack. So here, and again, so one or two images here are attacks. So let's see the participants in the in this webinar can sharpen your magnifying glasses and can see which one of these images you think are attacks. So here, so the way that this is done is that the bad guys are taking photo. They're cutting out the face, the kind of the figure of the human, and present it to the camera. The reason it works, again, there's a little bit of a depth because there's a background behind this picture. So for some of the systems, it's difficult to kind of to make that distinction. So I'm curious, Chris, what are we seeing in the chat right now? What are the numbers that are being presented?
I would say the most common response, Alexey, is 2 and 4. I definitely see some 3s. Nobody seems to think that number 1 is a presentation attack, but yeah, I would say most of the guesses are 2 and 4, and I would pretty even between those two.
Okay, so drum beat. So and that is correct as well. So again, what we're seeing now, what we're seeing in the chat in the first one with the 3D mask, there's a pretty strong consensus about number 2. Now we're seeing more number 3s. So there's some errors here. So we're starting to see how sometimes for humans, all the majority of participants are doing a fantastic job here. It identified number 2 and number 4 as attacks, and this is exactly what they are. This is the instances where people just cut out the heads and presented them. But we're starting to see some of the errors where people didn't identify 2 and 4 and thought number 3 is an attack. In reality, it means that number 3 would be rejected to get access to something, to open an account and get access to whatever the product or service is this lady is trying to get access to. So that's the so that's the result here. So we're starting to see a little bit of a kind of error rate here building up. Now we're getting to kind of more difficult attacks for the human eye. Again, one or few images here are attacks, and I was wondering, and here is a screen display attack. So the way that this attack works is that a person has a picture and downloads a picture of the internet or somewhere, and then displays it on the screen of his or her computer, and then takes a picture of that screen, right? So let's see if you can identify where this is an actual picture or where we see the picture of a picture on a screen. That's the distinction here. So that's and this is the as you can imagine, it's much cheaper attack to do because you don't need to build a silicon mask. You don't need to bother with your craftsmanship with your scissors. So all you need to do is just to put a picture on the screen and then snap a shot of that. So Chris, what do we see in the chat?
We're seeing a fairly even split, I would say, between 2, 3, and 4. A lot of answers of 3 and a fair number of 4, yeah, but definitely more than a couple of 2. I've got a guess of 1, but only one person has guessed number 1 so far. Yeah, and I mean, this just a couple of people now have guessed 1, so we've got a bit of an even split, a lean certainly towards number 4, and I guess number 2. But yeah, very, very divided. We're a divided house.
All right. So let's see the actual results here. So those of you who guessed number 2 and number 4 are correct. So these are the attacks. Number 1 and number 3 are the genuine genuine selfies. So this attack is you see, it's much more difficult for the human eye to identify, but it's actually a pretty good case for the AI, and we'll share the results later. But you can see but what the technology is looking for in this case is some type of a pixelation that can sometimes be seen. Sometimes is what's called the Moore effect. When you're taking a picture of a screen, you can sometimes see some discolorations. You can see a little bit of a kind of granularity here in the left, with with this guy, and just to show you like where how this attack is being done. Again, we see the picture on the screen, and then what the bad guy is just doing, just takes the camera close enough so you don't see the borders, you don't see the edges, you don't see the kind of the identifying marks of the picture being displayed on the screen. And so one more line of attack, one more chance for you guys to kind of test your ability to identify spoofs and see how would you perform in the study that we did. So here's the print copy. So here, so the line of attack here, and again, the participants in the study, they didn't know what is the line of attack, but we're giving you hints to help you guys. So here, the print copy attack is when you print the photograph and then you present the photograph again in the way that the edges of the photograph is not seen by the camera. You just take it close enough to the camera to do that. Again, 1 or 2 images here are attacks, and I wonder if you can examine this and take a kind of quick decision. Where do you see this 1 or 2 images that represents the attacks? So Chris, what are we seeing in the chat?
Well, we're definitely we're seeing a little bit of agreement. Some modest agreement, let's say. Modest agreement. I see some 2s. I see some 3s and 4s. I would say most votes probably, I would say 4s probably got the most votes. But I've also we've seen guesses of 1s, 2s, and 3s. And I'll just volunteer at this point that when Alexey had me do this, a couple of us with Biometric Update, it was around this point where we just threw up our hands and said, we don't really know. But I think it's important to emphasize that this is a relatively unsophisticated attack, right? This is a cheap, readily available attack method that practically any hacker out there is going to be capable of pulling off, right?
Absolutely. So let's see. So the majority of votes, so the consensus is building around number 4 being an attack, and then
very divided again. Yeah.
So here are the results. So number 4 is actually a genuine selfie, not an attack, but the attacks are number 1 and number 3. So again, so now you're starting to see that you would think that it's a pretty simple task. Like you would think that it's such a simple task to identify a presentation attack when it's done, but actually, if you don't have some clear clues like the borders and like the edges of the photos here, it's very difficult. And we as humans, there's certain limitations here what we can do to actually identify those and make a distinction between a selfie of a person and a presentation attack in a picture of a selfie. And that's what we've seen in the study, and it's interesting that the result that we're seeing here in this webinar are very close of resembling the in a very close resemblance to the results of the study that we've seen. So let's look at the results. So we had a little fun, we tried it ourselves. So let's see, and so what are the results on a much larger scale, at the scale of 8,000 and 800 people. So two types of errors that can be detected in biometrics. One is missing out an attack and identifying a spoof as a live person. So that's a security threat. And then the second type of an attack is the bona fide and identifying a bona fide or good selfie as an attack. So that's more of a user experience issue. So
I just want to jump in and interrupt for a moment, Alexey, just
yeah.
to mention for some of these terms are, I think, probably very familiar to many of us in the room, but not all of us.
Yeah.
So I just want to mention that APCER, it might be helpful to think of that. The A stands for attack, and the C stands for classification. So it's attack classification. You're right or wrong, right? And then the BPCER, bona fide classification. So did you get it right when it was a real presentation, right?
Absolutely. And what we're seeing, and this is the results of where we're taking the answers from the participants, on the individual basis. So what we're seeing is pretty consistent with what we just had, on our webinar, right? So the masks, the vast majority of the people correctly identified masks, and only few errors here. So and that's what we're seeing in representation here. So the cutouts, the masks, we're seeing 2%. It's not great from the security standpoint, but that's that's fine. But 30% on the printed photos, that is unacceptable. That is completely unacceptable performance from the security standpoint. So that is pretty close to to randomized results.
And keeping in mind, it's a yes or no question, right? So it's 50% means you did nothing. So.
Exactly. And ironically, again, it was we didn't think about it this way before we conducted the study, that the cheapest, the simplest type of attack is actually the most difficult one for humans to detect. So I hope there are no fraudsters on this webinar, because the conclusion for the fraudsters is don't invest in the silicon mask. Just the printed photo is the way to go to spoof the human testers, human participants. And then the display attack is also a very significant number of errors and very significant number of attacks that went through undetected. And then this number is actually, in my mind, is even worse. Because if you're a large enterprise and you're dealing with millions and millions of checks, or if you're dealing with millions and millions of accounts that are being opened, or you're checking for people to get access to something, if you're rejecting 18% of your traffic, that is a huge number. That is so this number is creates a true barrier in the user experience, and leads to the abandonment. Because if it takes a long time, if it takes many tries to go through this check, a lot of the people would just leave the process and just abandon it. And we're seeing it in practice. We're hearing a lot of feedback that if the process takes a long time, if it takes minutes, the abandonment rate just skyrockets immediately. So we talked about this whole idea of the jury. So we would we'll give the people who participated in the study a bit of a chance to to remove just accidental errors, and really the more maybe philosophical idea by introducing this ability to vote to see if we can increase the performance by taking into account multiple examiners on a single image, is to see how far the humans can go. Because in reality, of course, no organization, no enterprise will have 17 people look at the same image. But just how far can this human ability go? Like if we remove all the accidental errors, if we just take kind of the really truly the majority rule, how far can we improve this? And again, what's interesting is that some of the attacks, the error rate on the security side of things, on the ability to kind of not to allow attacks, when some of the attacks we're seeing zeros, right? So the printed cutouts, and again, in our little study, we've seen that majority correctly identified the printouts. We've seen the majority correctly identified the 3D mask. For display attacks, for screen replace, the error rate was cut in half, but for printed photos, it remained extremely high. Extremely high, 27%. This is and this is the huge vulnerability when it comes to the kind of the capability of a human to identify and make a distinction between the presentation attack and the and in the genuine selfie. When we kind of combine the capabilities of people, when we allow people kind of to vote, when we look at the majority, we've seen a huge improvement in the BPCR or the number of the kind of good people that were rejected. Went down from 18% to 3%. It's still very high. If you're thinking of the enterprise level, that's a very high number, but this is much better. So so there's some hope for humanity, so to speak here. And then let's see how the AI capability performed on the same data set. So the good news is that from security perspective, it went extremely well. So not a single attack went through. So both sophisticated attacks, cheap attacks, AI is looking at different the different artifacts that can be attributed to different types of attacks. And it was successful in identifying all sorts of attacks at scale. So that's a great news. And if we're looking at the bona fide rejection rate, it's also much lower than what the humans did, than what the people I identified. So when we're kind of when we're kind of combining and the results, what we're seeing is that the abstract, again, the number of attacks that went through for people was around 10%. If we average out across all 5 types of attacks, and for AI, it was about 0. If we look at the number of people that were incorrectly rejected, again, on the individual basis, and we're looking at the individual basis here because that's what's happening in the field. That's what happens in reality, because again, when the enterprise is doing it, they're not putting it in front of many people. They're putting it for in front of one. So this is the levels that we can see, and for the machine, it's much lower. And then one very important line here is the last one, time to detect. So how long does it take for a person to process the image, to kind of to look for different things that might identify an image as a particular type of attack, and how long does it take an AI? And by the way, this experiment was run on a CPU. It was not a large, production GPU type environment. So it can actually be much faster in the kind of in the scale production system. But what we're seeing, even on a fairly kind of weak machine, AI does this check much faster, about 10 times faster. Right, and if we add some of the additional kind of checks that takes the image to get to the person in the enterprise deployment, for people, again, 4.5 seconds, that's the time for process. That's the time when the image is already on the screen. But it takes time to get there, and if there's a large volume, there's a queue, and that's what creates the situation where sometimes for organizations that rely on the human liveness check, it takes minutes. And again, the practical implication of that wait is that creates a huge abandonment rate, and we've seen organizations reporting up to 50 or 70% abandonment rate when it takes quite a long time. So So what are the conclusions of the study? So what we found out here is that AI is more accurate than people in identifying presentation attacks. It's both better at spotting the attacks, and it's better in identifying genuine selfies and genuine people. So first, creates a better security. Second, creates a better user experience. We also learned that AI is much faster, and it's important for the large-scale enterprise deployment of this type of capabilities. And we see it as a fantastic news. We think it's a great news. We're not we're not looking at it as a oh my God, humans are outperformed by the machines. Well, I cannot run like a Ferrari, but it's great that, or Ford or Hyundai, depending on your car preferences. But I don't have to run as fast. I can use the machine to kind of to help me from point A to point B much faster and with much more efficiency. And that's what we're seeing here, that we now have a capability that can really help the enterprise and technology to scale, to provide a much more secure environment for things like remote onboarding. And it also means that now with this much more secure and much faster results, these capabilities can be applicable to a variety of new use cases, such as repeat authentication or re-authentication. So not only when you're opening an account, you can make the check, but also when the customers are coming back. So great news. We now at the stage when the AI can provide the capability that's more secure and much more scalable than what the humans can do. So from ID R&D to the humanity, congratulations.
Absolutely. So a couple of points that I want to just jump in with here. One of which is one of the questions which was entered into the Q&A. How is the majority decision computed? So this is the 17 answers out of the 8,800 participants, correct?
Yeah. So so the images were presented to 17 different people. So we take the image number 1 and we present it to 17 people. And then we look at the results in the year and the answers by the 17 people. And we look, if majority of those 17 say it's a spoof, we record it as a spoof. If majority of the people record it as a genuine, we record it as a genuine.
So Jürgen, the answer to your question is basically yes. The individual decisions are aggregated to get them.
Exactly, yes. Mm-hmm.
That's good. And I just, before we get further into the Q&A, some good questions here for us, but for you, Alexey. But I've got, I just want to make a couple of observations or ask a couple of questions. One of them, in fact, you were referring to abandonment earlier, and we were talking about this in our setup call. And so I just had a quick look. I think an interesting statistic to keep in mind about abandonment. And this is a study that's about 2 years old, done by Signicat on people trying to access European financial services, right? So this is onboarding for a bank, anywhere in Europe. And at the time, they were saying that the total abandonment rate was 38%. So if you're a financial services provider or someone who's providing technology to a financial services company, you don't have to really think very hard about the business impact of that, where you get somebody all the way through the adoption funnel to the point where they're holding their smartphone in their hands and taking a selfie and then not signing on as a customer, right? So, I mean, that's going to be problematic. And I would hope that it's come down a lot since then, but still, as we could clearly see from those BPCER rates, there's a better way, right? There's no need for it to be so high. Another thing that I just want to mention, you brought up scale, Alexey, and how that's changing over time, and as biometric checks are being used for more applications and so on. So I think one interesting point to me is that the middle rate out of the 5 error rates for the group results, right, was 0.15%. And you can imagine how we could look at that and say, well, that's a low number. Is 0.15% a low number?
Well, that really that number represents a security threat. So that means that percentage of attacks goes through, and if you're a financial institution, that's something that you surely want to be concerned about.
Absolutely, yeah. So important to keep in mind the scale, right? But we've got some good questions here too. So I would like to turn to audience questions at this point. So let's start with this demographic question. We've got 3 different questions on demographics. John asked, with the popular press's concentration on bias, certainly a fair point. Did you analyze the demographics of the 175,000 plus images?
So I think it's a fantastic question. And it is a very important one because we are seeing a lot of attention specifically that was raised to this issue in the field of facial recognition. There's this fantastic documentary on Netflix that I'm sure a lot of people saw specifically on this topic. Some of the governing bodies of this industry are looking into this issue. There's some standards that are being developed already in place that are done by NIST, and a lot of the facial recognition companies are doing work to make sure that their technology is compliant with those standards. We don't have the same done in facial liveness. It's a fairly new and green field for the facial liveness technology. I can tell you that ID R&D, we pay a very special attention. We've been working for the last year and a half specifically on making sure that our technology is unbiased, and it takes a fundamental change in the way that you're building this technology, the way that you're collecting data, the way that you're measuring the results, because one of the consequences of the fact that there's no kind of industry recognized standards of the way to measure it is that you actually have to come up with these methodology, develop it, and then use it to see how effective are you at producing a non-biased technology. So we've been and maybe I'll do a little teaser here. So we actually are working on the next study is specifically done on the topic of bias, and shortly we will be sharing the very detailed and big results in a big study on the topic of bias and liveness. And I'm not gonna jump the gun and tell you all of the results of that study now, but we absolutely see this is one of the most important issues that's facing this industry, this technology. We'll share the results of the study in all the details. This study that we're presenting now, it was done on a data set that's well represented when it comes to demographics. What you've seen is that you've seen the composition of this data set is when we're working on it, we were looking at the racial composition, of the gender composition, of the age composition. So it's not just a kind of one-dimensional story, it's a multi-dimensional space, graphs that you need to take into account. The crowdsourcing platform that we used to conduct the study, it's a global crowdsourcing platform. So participants that participated in the study were joining in from multiple countries and multiple continents. So we kind of so we wanted to make sure that there's a diversity both on the side of a data set and also on the side of the people who are participating. Yeah,
so there's two more questions on the bias issue, and one of them you just touched on there, the demographics of the people participating. Now it's 17 for an aggregated answer, but it's 8,800 in total, right? So they came to you through this crowdsourcing, pardon me,
Yeah.
platform. Do you have any idea about the makeup of those people?
Really, all across the world. We had a lot of people in Europe. There's a very big contingent in South America, in Africa, in Latin, a little bit of Asia.
Okay. Well, and as actually, as John just pointed out quite correctly in the chat, determining race is not exactly an easy thing to do at the best of times, let alone by looking at a picture of someone, right? So the way that NIST does it, this, as John points out, is through a country of origin, right? That's sort of the corollary that is the best we can do. I think you've also touched on, as far as question and as far, you may have to wait a little bit to get the full details on this, but he points out that cross-border digital identification frameworks are becoming more prominent and being adopted that will incorporate people from all sorts of different demographies in the same system. And he asks, can that impact the spoofing possibilities? So I guess that's something you're in the process of looking into.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in different jurisdictions, there's a different regulatory environment that requires different steps, in this process. In different processes or use cases where this technology can be applied. There's one thing, for the re-authentication. There's a different thing for account opening. One of the interesting kind of things and trends that we're seeing is that in some of the European countries, the regulators are starting to push for more human involvement in in authentication and liveness checks. And this was a very interesting and a little bit of a puzzling trend for us, because what we're clearly seeing from the study is that the technology is actually doing a better job and much more accurate than people in making that determination. And yet we are starting to see that push for the more human touch. So we are seeing kind of these different currents in the industry, and it's yet to be seen which way it's going to go. Our guess is that the way that we're looking at it is that the technology is clearly better. It's faster. It's much more user friendly. It's much more secure. So in the end of the day, the kind of from practical standpoint, we'll see more use of technology than humans. And I think that the results like this tend to prove that point.
But and also, to be clear, at the same time, you are not suggesting that border processes should entirely 100% be the same as like remote onboarding to a bank account or something like that, right?
Well, I'm not saying that, but it's interesting that you mention it, because we are seeing a very significant growth in a number of kind of use cases around travel industry, both the border crossing, where people just go into the kiosk, they present a document, then they then take a picture, and liveness checks are already being deployed at the border crossing. So these capabilities are already deployed in the border crossing process. So that's already happening. Same with the travel industry, where you can do the where you can go through your airport experience with an app, again, with the facial recognition, with some of the additional checks, and liveness is part of that equation. Similarly, with the checking on your flights in airlines. So we are seeing a trend where where the technologies are helping people to streamline these processes. Whether they will completely replace people, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, sure. But and there's a scale issue there as well, right? Because if you don't know, I mean, I know if the airports or airlines were here, they would say, well, we don't want to hire 100 people to just process this one line if a couple can do it, right? So I do want to actually switch tracks a little bit here. There are a couple of questions about the nature of the AI used. Niels asks if deep learning is involved. Is deep learning involved, and how many pictures would be needed to improve the learning of the AI system?
Well, this is a great question because this is the AI-based technology that's been deployed here. Of course, you use various types of neural networks, and it's trained on a very large amounts of data, and that's why and that's what I kind of was partly referring to when I was explaining how difficult is it to build a non-biased algorithms, because you must have a properly scaled and proportionally scaled data set that you're dealing with when you're training the technology, to make sure that it produces the unbiased results. And we're talking millions and millions and tens of millions of images that must be first properly labeled, right? Because if they're not properly labeled, if there's some errors in labeling, garbage in, garbage out. So they must be first correctly labeled, and then you need to train on them, and they need to be organized in the right way. So it's a very it's a very big part of a success in this field, and this is and having the right amount of data, the correctly organized data, it's one of the most important ingredients.
Right. Right. So the quality matters as well as the quantity in terms of that,
yes,
that training data. Let's race through a few here, because we've got lots of really good questions. Lana asks about detecting video stream spoofing attacks. This is a really important point too, because all of the data that you just shared with us is based on single image analysis, right? So could you maybe just briefly touch on what that means, and is that the norm, and how does video play in that?
So this is actually a great question, because when it comes to the liveness detection, when it comes to the automatic liveness detection, there are two ways to do it. There are two types of technologies that we see on the market. One is called the active liveness, and the other one is called the passive liveness. So the active liveness is based on the idea that you want to ask a person to do something, and then based on the person doing that, you can determine that that person is actually live in front of the device. You can ask a person, move the phone in a certain way. You can ask the person to turn your head, close your eyes, smile. I've seen people asking, to follow that on the screen with your nose, which is, I'm sure, so socially it's a pretty awkward thing to do. But that's the active path. So it requires a communication to a user that you need to do this, and then you need to have a participating user who understands the instructions and follows the instruction and does that. And that creates a pretty significant block on the user experience, because you want to get through authentication as quickly as possible, right? You don't want to spend time doing that. And that's where the idea of the passive liveness is so popular right now, because what we presented today is the liveness capabilities based on a single shot. So we're not asking a person to do anything. The person already took a selfie for the purposes of facial recognition, and liveness actually uses the same image for the liveness analysis. So it's a passive story. So when it comes to the video, when you take a picture, somebody is playing a video, and the bad guy, is presenting it to a camera, and the camera is taking a picture. It just treated as a standalone picture of a screen, right? So there's no difference for this type of application between a static picture and a video. So when we were looking at the screen display attacks, again, from the AI perspective, there's no difference between a video and a static picture.
Right. Has there been any research done into along these lines in terms of synthetic images or deepfakes?
That is a growing, this is a growing security threat. We're seeing more and more feedback from our customers from the ground, from the field, that the company is seeing a growing number of attacks based on synthetic faces and the deep fakes, and these are two different types of attacks, by the way. And there are AI technologies that are being developed and already deployed to address them and to make the distinction between the person and the synthetic face or deep fake.
So this is going to probably be a subject of future research in the field, right?
Well, it's already something that's being done, and this is something that is being deployed or soon being deployed in production across the globe. Because this is as any security, or like if you can compare it to the antivirus software. It's a constant race between the good guys and the bad guys. And the bad guys, once they realize that you can't just take a picture, you can't just play a video, or you can't just put a mask on, they start thinking, what else can we do? And oh, here's the new technology to make synthetic faces, or to stick my face on somebody else's face. And they try to utilize that technology for their bad purposes. So good guys like we're building a technology that can identify those instances and stop them. So this is an additional functionality that is that ID R&D is working on, and that is something that is being addressed.
Great. And how about limitations in terms of the camera hardware being used? What's the impact of camera hardware on the camera quality on spoofing?
Yeah. So the requirements are very modest. So pretty much any camera that you can find on any smartphone, any camera that you can find on any laptop, produces good enough images for the liveness analysis. So in practicality, there are no limitations.
Right, the important point too. Now, Niels also asks about if you would consider doing a similar experiment with other biometrics such as fingerprints or iris. I'm gonna throw voice in there for our purposes. Yeah. Well, or would you? Let's try and direct people maybe a little bit in terms of resources for the topic in general.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting topic, and it's and as we're seeing more and more deployments of biometrics, different modalities and sometimes multimodal systems. The question of liveness, becomes increasingly important, because a good biometric system must be answering those two questions that we mentioned in the beginning: is this the right person? Is this a person? So we're doing a lot of work in voice. So I can definitely talk about voice. And when it comes to the liveness in voice, there are two types of attacks that we're successfully dealing with. One is a replay attack, where AI can distinguish between a human voice and a recording of a human voice being played. And then the second type of attack is a human voice and a computer generated speech. And with the advancements of AI, there are more and more engines that allow you to create a voice that sounds like somebody, and it can even fool people. And bad guys are actively using that, by the way. So so there are definitely some security threats with other biometric modalities, but there are some liveness key capabilities there as well. And we would be interested to maybe partner with some other participants in this market to run similar experiments with other modalities as well.
Great. And we are running up against the top of the hour, so we're going to have to leave the points that we had picked out about the metaverse, the implications of that for liveness, all sorts of. We might have had too much fun coming up with different things to talk about in our pre-call. So lesson learned. Yeah, no, it's obviously a very hot topic. So Alexey, I would just like to ask you to close out by letting everyone know how they can get in touch with ID R&D, how they can get in touch with you about further questions. There was another question about the AI system used. So some people may want to get a little deeper into that. So yeah, how can people get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So on your screen right now, you can see QR code and the link that I'm sure is very easy to remember while looking at it. So you can download the study. You can go to our website idrnd.ai to learn more about the current stage of liveness capabilities for passive facial liveness, for voice biometrics and voice liveness. And you can find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on. So yeah, but I would encourage people to download the study through QR code and idrnd.ai. You can find a wealth of information there, and there are ways to contact us through the again through the LinkedIn, through the website. You can send an email at info@idrnd.ai.
Perfect, great. So a few different ways that people can reach out. Please do download and check out the research results. And I really want to thank everyone for participating very actively in the chat. It was a great fun doing the poll. Thank you very much for your questions. A lot of really good questions. You can tell people are really thinking about this topic. And thank you, Alexey. And thanks for teasing that next report as well. I definitely see some interest around that. So we'll look forward to the next time. And thanks to everyone. Have great afternoons.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alexey. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.